Welcome back to Lena's Romantasy Collection, where the alphas are possessive, the mates are spicy, and the romance is always complicated. Quick question for the pack before we get snowed in today. If you were forced to share one bed with a grumpy alpha king, are you building a pillow wall? Or are you accidentally rolling over to his side? Let me know in the comments. Also, drop a squirrel or rat emoji below if your pet runs the house, because today, you're going to meet the real main character of this story, Bandit. He's a sugar glider with a criminal record, 0 survival instincts, and he is not afraid to slap a king. Today's story is hilarious, steamy, and involves a very organized heroine, a very stressed alpha, and a blizzard that traps them in the same room. But before we turn up the heat, if you want to support the channel and get early access to spicy stories like this one, hit that join button down below. It helps keep the lights on and buys me enough coffee to keep writing these cliffhangers. Now, grab your snacks, but hide them from Bandit. Get cozy, and let's find out exactly why this Alpha King says, "I sleep on top." Chapter 1. The Flying Squirrel Incident. The Grimspan estate didn't look like a home. It looked like a mausoleum for joy. The architecture was all sharp angles and brooding Gothic stone, perched precariously on a cliff edge as if daring the ocean below to swallow it whole. I, however, was determined to bring some order to this monochromatic nightmare. "All right, Bandit," I muttered, adjusting the strap of my velvet pouch where my sugar glider, Bandit, was currently napping. The client might be the terrifying butcher of Oakhaven, but that just means he's probably ancient, grumpy, and definitely needs a label maker. Do not hiss at him. Bandit shifted against my chest, letting out a soft crabbing noise that I interpreted as, "I hiss at who I want, woman." I marched into the library, a cavernous room that smelled of old parchment and neglect. It was a chaos coordinator's dream and a normal person's purgatory. Books were stacked in precarious towers that defied gravity. Scrolls were shoved into vases. It was beautiful chaos. I set down my kit, 3 different label makers, color-coded sticky notes, and emergency chocolate, and got to work. An hour later, I was balanced on the top rung of a rolling ladder, dust streaked across my cheek, belting out an off-key rendition of a pop ballad while trying to organize the ancient treaties section. And I said, "Stay, stay, stay," I sang, reaching for a dusty leather tome. The heavy oak doors creaked open. I didn't hear them over my own terrible singing. A figure stepped into the room. He was massive. Not gym rat massive, but something more primal. Like a mountain that had decided to wear a bespoke Italian suit. He had broad shoulders that looked like they carried a boulder, dark hair combed with severe precision, and a stillness about him that screamed predator. Torian Vras, the Alpha King, the butcher of Oakhaven, and I was singing at him. I froze, clutching the book to my chest. He looked up, his eyes the color of molten gold, narrowing in confusion. He opened his mouth, likely to fire me or perhaps eat me. "Who?" He never finished the sentence. Bandit, sensing a new presence, decided this was the perfect moment to wake up. He popped his tiny head out of my pouch, took one look at the towering Alpha King, and chose violence. With a screech that sounded like a deflating balloon, Bandit launched himself from my chest. He soared through the air, a furry, gliding missile of fury, and latched directly onto Torian's face. "Bandit!" I shrieked. Torian stumbled back, flailing. For a man rumored to have dismantled rival packs with his bare hands, he looked utterly defeated by 6 ounces of marsupial. He didn't roar. He just made a muffled sound of absolute bewilderment as Bandit clung to his nose, hissing like a broken tea kettle. "Get it off!" Torian rumbled, his voice deep enough to vibrate the floorboards. I scrambled down the ladder, nearly tripping over my own feet. "Don't hurt him! You're startling him!" "I'm startling him?" Torian managed to peel one of Bandit's tiny paws off his eyelid. I rushed forward, grabbing Torian's wrist to stop him from swatting my baby. "Stop moving! You're making him anxious!" I reached up, expertly unhooking Bandit's claws from the alpha's expensive lapel and his cheekbone. "Come here, you little delinquent." Bandit detached, chattering angrily, and scurried onto my shoulder, glaring at the king. Torian stood there, blinking. His suit was rumpled. There was a tiny red scratch on his nose. He looked at me, then at the sugar glider, then back at me. The silence was heavy, thick with potential doom. "You," he said, his voice void of emotion, "brought a rat into my library." "He is a sugar glider," I corrected instinctively, smoothing Bandit's fur. "And you walked in without knocking. You scared him." I waited for the execution. I waited for the famous Alpha command. Instead, Torian lifted a hand to his cheek, touched the scratch, and looked at the blood on his finger. "He has significant grip strength." "He works out," I deadpanned. Torian stared at me. For a second, I thought I saw the corner of his mouth twitch, but his expression slammed shut like a vault door. "Get back to work. If the rat eats a book, I'm billing you." He turned and stalked out, stiff-backed, leaving me and Bandit standing in the dust. "Well," I whispered to Bandit, who was currently grooming his tail, "I think he likes us." Chapter 2: The Silent King. I expected to be fired by email, or perhaps escorted off the property by security guards who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast. Instead, the next morning I was back in the library, and Torian Varas was sitting at the massive mahogany desk in the corner, watching me. He wasn't working. He had a stack of documents in front of him, but he hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. He was just observing. It was unnerving. It felt like being studied by a wolf deciding if you were prey or a chew toy. "Is there something you need, Your Majesty?" I asked, snapping a label onto a shelf. "Treaties, 1800 to 1900. Torian blinked, as if surprised I could speak. "No. Proceed." I went back to organizing. Bandit was currently helping. He had found a stash of gold paper clips and was busy trying to carry them, one by one, into his pouch. He looked like a tiny, furry contractor trying to steal building supplies. "Drop it, Bandit," I sighed without looking. Bandit chirped defiantly but dropped the paperclip. "Your creature," Torian said suddenly. His voice was a low rumble that seemed to start in the center of the earth. "Why does it do that?" I turned. Torian was leaning forward, his golden eyes fixed on Bandit, who was now trying to drag a highlighter across the desk. "He likes to feel useful. He thinks he's running errands. We're collaborating." Torian looked at the highlighter, then at me. "Collaborating?" "Yes. I organize the books. He organizes the shiny things into his bed." Torian stood up. The movement was fluid and silent, predatory in a way that made the hair on my arm stand up. He walked over to the shelf I had just finished. He reached out, his large hand hovering over the spines of the books. He adjusted one, pushing it a millimeter to the left, so it was perfectly flush with the others. "Your piles," he said, his tone flat. "They are adequate." I stiffened. Adequate? I had color-coded 3 centuries of werewolf history by pack allegiance and binding type. It was a masterpiece of logistical prowess. "Adequate?" I repeated, my voice rising an octave. Sir, this shelving system is efficient enough to make a librarian weep with joy. Adequate is for people who use cardboard boxes. Torian froze. He looked at me, his eyes widening slightly. It occurred to me then that people probably didn't snap at the butcher of Oakhaven. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then looked at his signet ring, spinning it nervously on his pinky finger. I meant satisfactory. Highly satisfactory. It sounded like an insult, I said, crossing my arms. Bandit mimicked me, standing on his hind legs on the shelf. I am not proficient at compliments, Torian admitted, looking at the ceiling, then the floor, anywhere but my eyes. I usually just buy things. You can't buy organization skills, I huffed. He stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then, abruptly, he turned and walked out of the room without another word. Weirdo, I whispered. 10 minutes later, the heavy doors opened again. A terrified-looking butler scurried in, placed a silver platter on my workstation, and bolted. I looked down. On the platter sat a mountain of gourmet cookies, macadamia nut, chocolate chunk, oatmeal raisin, and right in the center, a tiny thimble-sized piece of dried papaya. There was a note on heavy cardstock written in sharp, angular handwriting. For the collaborator. Bandit let out a squeak of pure joy and dove for the papaya. I picked up a chocolate cookie, looking at the empty doorway. Okay, I murmured, taking a bite. Maybe he's only partially a monster. Chapter 3. The Mint versus the Blizzard. The weatherman had called it a light flurry. The weatherman was a liar. By 4 p.m., the sky over Oakhaven had turned a bruised purple, and snow was falling in sheets so thick I couldn't see the cliff edge. It was a supernatural squall, the kind that smelled of ozone and ancient magic. Come on, Minty, I pleaded, turning the key in the ignition of my Volkswagen Beetle. Don't do this to me, not today. The Mint groaned, coughed, and died. No, no, no! I banged my forehead against the steering wheel. The car was rapidly turning into an igloo. Bandit was shivering in his pouch against my chest, making unhappy clicking sounds. I know, buddy, I know. It's cold. A sharp rap on the window made me jump. I looked up to see a looming silhouette through the frosted glass. I rolled the window down an inch, letting in a blast of freezing wind. Torian stood there. He wasn't wearing a coat. He was in a white dress shirt, the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Snow melted instantly against his skin, steam actually rising from his shoulders. He looked like a furnace in human form. Get out of the vehicle, Zola, he shouted over the wind. I just need to jump it, I yelled back. The battery is just being dramatic. The snow is 3 feet deep and rising, Torian growled, pulling the door open. The metal groaned in protest against the ice. Your toy car is not going anywhere. It is not a toy. It's vintage. It is a glorified lunchbox, he retorted. Out. Now. I unbuckled my seatbelt, clutching Bandit closer. I can't stay here. I have clients tomorrow. Torian didn't argue. He just reached in. He didn't grab my arm. He grabbed the car. With a grunt of exertion that made his biceps strain against the white fabric of his shirt, he literally lifted the front end of the Mint and shoved it sideways, out of the deep drift I'd buried it in, just to clear a path for me to step out. I stared, open-mouthed. He had just deadlifted a Volkswagen. He offered me a hand. His skin was radiating heat, hot enough to feel from a foot away. I took it, and he pulled me out of the car and into his chest to shield me from a gust of wind. For a second, I was pressed against him. He smelled like wood smoke, expensive soap, and pure, unadulterated heat. My breath hitched. He felt solid, unmovable. He looked down at me, his golden eyes burning through the storm. The pass is blocked. The bridge is iced over. No one gets in or out of the estate until the storm breaks. But you are trapped, Zola, he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly register that vibrated in my spine. He let go of me and stepped back, wind whipping his dark hair. Welcome to the lockdown. Bandit poked his head out of my scarf, looked at the snow, and immediately retreated back into the warmth of my cleavage. Smart rat, Torian muttered, turning toward the mansion. Follow me, unless you want to freeze in the lunchbox. Chapter 4. Room Service. The mansion was freezing. The geothermal pump for the main wing is functional, Torian explained, walking briskly through the dark hallways. But the guest wing heating runs on the external grid, which is currently down. I jogged to keep up with his long strides. So, what, I sleep in the kitchen? The oven is warm. Don't be ridiculous, he scoffed, not looking back. We passed the staff quarters. The doors were shut tight. The staff are in the lower bunkers, Torian noted. They have their own supplies. We are effectively alone in the upper residence. Alone. With the Alpha King. In a blizzard. Where are we going? I asked, hugging myself. Even with my coat, the chill of the stone corridor was seeping into my bones. Bandit was trembling against my ribs. Torian stopped in front of a massive set of double doors at the end of the east wing. He pushed them open. Warmth rushed out like a physical wave. It smelled of cedar and amber. The room was cavernous, a master suite larger than my entire apartment. There was a fireplace roaring with gas flames, a sitting area with leather couches, and a wall of windows overlooking the whiteout storm. And in the center of the room, on a raised platform, sat a bed. It wasn't just a bed. It was an acre of mattress, a California king that looked like it could sleep a family of 5 comfortably. This is the only room with active heat, Torian said, closing the doors behind us and locking them. The click echoed loudly. I looked at the bed, then at him, then at the floor. I can sleep on the rug, I said quickly. It looks fluffy. Bandit likes rugs. Torian unbuttoned his cuffs, looking everywhere but at me. You are a guest. Guests do not sleep on the floor. I am an employee, I corrected. Employees do not sleep in the Alpha's bed. There is no other option, he said, his voice tight. The floor is stone beneath the rug. You'll freeze. He walked over to the closet and pulled out a spare duvet. The bed is large enough that we will not intersect. Intersect? I raised an eyebrow. Is that what we're calling it? Torian's neck turned a ruddy shade of red. I am trying to be accommodating, Zola. Do not make this difficult. He tossed the extra duvet onto the mattress, followed by a soft black t-shirt he pulled from a drawer. Wear this. It will be more comfortable than your work clothes. Fine, I said, realizing I couldn't feel my toes anymore. But we have rules. Strict rules. Torian looked at me, his expression unreadable. I follow rules better than anyone, Miss Prentice. Good. I marched over to the bed and poked the mattress. Memory foam. Expensive. Rule 1. Bandit sleeps on the pillow. Rule 2. No snoring. Rule 3. If you try any alpha dominance nonsense, I have pepper spray and I know how to use it. Torian looked offended. I do not snore, and I do not need to use dominance nonsense to get a woman's attention. Good, I said, taking off my coat. Bandit wiggled out of his pouch, leaped onto the bed, and immediately marked his territory by rubbing his face aggressively on the silk pillowcase. Torian watched the sugar glider with a look of resigned horror. That creature is going to shed on my 800 thread count sheets, isn't he? Probably, I smiled, feeling a little sadistic satisfaction. Get used to it, Your Highness. We're roommates now. Chapter 5. The Berlin Wall. The lights were out. The only illumination came from the dying embers of the fireplace, casting long, dancing shadows across the ceiling. I lay on the left side of the bed, stiff as a board. Torian lay on the right side, stiff as a statue. Between us rose a fortification of down pillows and rolled-up blankets I had constructed. I called it the Berlin Wall. It was a masterpiece of structural engineering designed to keep the big, scary wolf on his side. Zola, Torian's voice cut through the darkness. It was deep, rasping slightly with sleepiness. What? I whispered, clutching the sheets to my chin. Your rat is staring at me. I turned my head. Perched atop the pillow wall, silhouetted against the firelight, was Bandit. He was sitting on his haunches, unblinking, watching the Alpha King like a tiny, judgmental gargoyle. He's guarding me, I said. He doesn't trust you. He weighs less than a hamburger, Torian muttered. I could inhale him by accident. Don't you dare inhale my son. I heard the sheets rustle as Torian shifted. The scent of him, spices and rain, wafted over the pillow wall. It was annoying how good he smelled. It was unfair, really. I have never done this, Torian admitted quietly. The sarcasm was gone from his voice, replaced by a strange vulnerability. Done what? Sleep? Shared my bed, he said. With anyone. My territory is private. My heart did a traitorous little flutter. The Alpha King, the most feared man in the city, slept alone. Always. Why me then? I asked softly. You could have ordered me to sleep in the bathtub. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Because, Torian said, his voice barely audible. The thought of you shivering in the cold was unacceptable. It caused a physical discomfort in my chest. My breath caught. That was the bond. The ache. He felt it too. Go to sleep, Torian, I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut. Good night, Zola. I listened to his breathing even out, slow and rhythmic. Eventually, exhaustion took over. I drifted off, feeling safer than I had in years, guarded by a sugar glider and the monster on the other side of the wall. But I was a chaotic sleeper, and walls were meant to crumble. Chapter 6. The Kick. The fireplace had reduced to glowing embers, casting long, skeletal shadows across the vaulted ceiling of the master suite. The silence in the room was absolute, save for the rhythmic breathing of the Alpha King on the other side of the great pillow wall of Berlin. I was asleep. Deeply, truly asleep. In my dream, I was fighting off a horde of goblins who were trying to reorganize my color-coded filing system into alphabetical order. It was a nightmare of bureaucratic proportions. The lead goblin, a massive creature with glowing eyes, reached for my label maker. No! I shouted in my dream, launching a roundhouse kick to defend my office supplies. In reality, my leg shot out with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. I wasn't fighting a goblin. I was fighting the California King mattress, and the goblin was Torian Varas. My heel connected solidly with something hard. Ribs. Definitely ribs. There was a sharp intake of breath, followed by a heavy, meaty thud as the King of Oakhaven was launched off the side of his own bed. He hit the floor with the grace of a sack of potatoes. The noise woke me up instantly. I bolted upright, hair wild, clutching the duvet to my chest. Bandit? Did we crash? Bandit, who had been sleeping on top of the pillow wall, hissed at the darkness. A hand appeared on the edge of the mattress. It was large, veined, and gripping the sheets so tightly the knuckles were white. Slowly, ominously, Torian pulled himself up. He didn't look like a king. He looked like a murder waiting to happen. His hair was mussed, his shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, and his golden eyes were glowing with a predatory luminescence in the dark. "Zola," he growled. It wasn't a question. It was a warning. I blinked, still half trapped in my dream. You were breathing too loud, and you were encroaching on my territory. Torian stared at me. He had just been physically assaulted in his own home by an employee half his size, and I was accusing him of breathing violations? I was asleep, he said, his voice a low vibration that rattled the bed frame. On the very edge of the mattress. You, however, sprawl like a starfish. I do not starfish, I argued, though I knew for a fact I starfished. I maximized my surface area for thermal regulation. Torian climbed back onto the bed. He didn't stay on his side this time. He moved the pillow wall. With a casual flick of his wrist, he tossed my architectural masterpiece onto the floor. Hey! That was load-bearing, I protested, reaching for the pillows. No more walls, he rumbled, moving closer. The heat radiating off him was intense, a furnace blast against the chill of the room. He wasn't just close, he was there. If you kick me again, Miss Prentice, I will not be the one hitting the floor. I narrowed my eyes, sleep deprivation making me bold. I poked his chest, which felt like poking a steel door. Then stay on your side. Move over. You're hogging the oxygen. The air in the room shifted. It grew heavy, charged with static. Torian stopped moving. He looked at my finger on his chest, then up at my face. The golden light in his eyes flared brighter, eclipsing the human brown. Move over? He repeated softly. Yes, move. He didn't move away. He moved up. Chapter 7. I Sleep on Top. The shift in dynamic was visceral. One second we were bickering roommates. The next, I was looking up at a predator who had decided he was done playing with his food. Torian moved with a speed that blurred the edges of my vision. Before I could retract my finger, he caught my wrist. His grip wasn't painful, he was careful, almost reverent, but it was absolute. He pinned my hand to the mattress above my head. He loomed over me, his broad shoulders blocking out the firelight, casting me in his shadow. His other hand landed beside my head, boxing me in. His scent engulfed me. Cedar, rain, and the dark, musky smell of an alpha in command. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Torian? He lowered his head until his lips were inches from my ear. I could feel the heat of his breath on my neck, sending shivers racing down my spine. I don't move over, Zola, he murmured, his voice rough, scraping against my nerves in the most delicious way possible. I am the king. I do not yield territory. He shifted his weight, his knee pressing between my legs, not intimately, but dominantly. He was heavy, a solid weight of muscle and power. And in this bed, he whispered, the words vibrating through my chest, I sleep on top. The silence that followed was deafening. My brain short-circuited. My logical, organizing, label-making brain shut down, replaced by a very primal instinct that wanted to pull him closer. But I was Zola Prentice. I didn't swoon. I negotiated. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain steady. Is that a threat, Your Majesty? Or a promise? Torian froze. The question hung in the air, charged and dangerous. He pulled back slightly, looking down at me. For a moment, I saw the raw hunger in his eyes, the desire to claim, to mark, to own. But then, the human part of him caught up. He realized where he was. He realized he was pinning his employee to a mattress while she was drowning in one of his spare t-shirts. The gold faded from his eyes, replaced by panic. He released my wrist as if it burned him. He scrambled back, nearly falling off the bed again in his haste to put distance between us. He cleared his throat, straightening his rumpled shirt with trembling hands. I apologize. That was inappropriate. The instincts, the storm. He stood up, pacing to the fireplace, running a hand through his hair. He looked like a man who had just looked over the edge of a cliff and realized he wanted to jump. You're sleeping on the floor, I whispered, clutching the duvet. Yes, Torian agreed, his voice sounding strangled. He grabbed a pillow and marched to the rug near the fire. I am sleeping on the floor, for everyone's safety. Bandit, who had watched the entire exchange from the headboard, let out a soft chirp that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Chapter 8. Domestic Bliss and Chaos. The next morning, the blizzard was still raging outside, turning the windows into sheets of white opacity. Inside, the Grimsbin estate was silent, cold, and hungry. I assume you have a kitchen? I asked, wrapping myself in the duvet like a burrito. Or do you just hunt deer in the garden? Torian looked up from where he was stoking the fire. He had dark circles under his eyes, clearly having not slept on the rug. There is an industrial kitchen on this floor, though I rarely utilize it. Lead the way. I need coffee, and Bandit needs fruit. The kitchen was spectacular. It was all stainless steel, black marble, and appliances that looked like they belonged on a spaceship. It was also completely pristine, as if no one had ever cracked an egg in it. Okay, I said, opening the massive refrigerator. It was stocked with bachelor essentials, bottled water, raw steaks, and a lonely jar of artisanal mustard. I dug a little deeper and found a block of sharp cheddar and a stick of butter. We can work with this. I found the loaf of bread in the pantry. Grilled cheese! It's the food of the people! Torian stood by the island looking lost. This was a man who commanded armies and negotiated billion-dollar treaties. Yet he looked at the toaster like it was an alien artifact. Do you want to help? I asked, handing him the cheese grater. He took the grater, holding it by the very edge. I am not proficient in culinary arts. My staff handles consumption logistics. Consumption logistics? I laughed. It's called cooking, Torian. Here, grate the cheese. Don't grate your fingers. Wolves heal fast, but blood ruins the cheddar. I watched him. It was fascinating. He treated the block of cheddar with intense, lethal focus. He grated with rhythmic precision, his brow furrowed in concentration. When a piece of cheese fell onto the counter, he picked it up and placed it back in the bowl with the care of a bomb disposal technician. Bandit, meanwhile, had discovered the butter dish. Bandit, no! I scolded, shooing him away. He hissed at me, his tiny hands slick with grease. Torian stopped grating. He watched me wrestle the butter away from the sugar glider. A small, genuine smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Not the terrifying smirk of a king, but a soft, human expression. You are chaotic, he observed quietly. I am organized chaos, I corrected, flipping the sandwiches onto a skillet. The smell of melting butter and toasting bread filled the sterile kitchen. There's a difference. I have never had someone cook in here, he admitted, leaning against the counter. He looked relaxed for the first time since I'd met him. It usually smells like cleaning chemicals. Well, now it smells like cholesterol. I slid a plate toward him. Eat up, Your Majesty. No forks allowed. He picked up the sandwich with 2 hands, took a bite, and closed his eyes. Acceptable, he murmured, wiping a crumb from his lip. Just acceptable? Exceptional, he corrected, looking at me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. The best consumption logistics I have ever experienced. Chapter 9. The Shower Walk-In. By afternoon, the estate groaned. The pipes in the walls rattled like dying snakes, echoing through the empty halls. The geothermal pump is straining, Torian noted, looking up from a book in the library. The pressure valves stick in extreme cold. I'll check the bathroom, I said, grabbing my toiletry bag. I need a shower anyway. I feel like a yeti. I went into the master bath, a room the size of my apartment, covered in slate and obsidian tile. The shower was a walk-in cavern with no door, just a glass partition. I turned the handle. Nothing. Just a sad, gurgling sound. Great, I muttered. Come on, you stupid plumbing. I twisted the knob harder, yanked the diverter, and banged on the pipe. Suddenly, the pipes let out a shriek, and steam blasted into the room. Yes, I cheered, turning around to grab my towel. I froze. Torian was standing there. I hadn't heard him enter. He must have come in through the connecting door from the gym, and he was undressed. Well, mostly. He had a towel wrapped low around his hips, threatening to succumb to gravity at any moment. But the rest of him was bare. And it was a lot of rest. He was sculpted like a god of war. Defined muscle, broad chest, and veins traversing his arms like maps. But it was the scars that held my gaze. Silver, jagged lines crisscrossed his torso. Claw marks. Remnants of challenges won, of wars fought. He wasn't just a businessman in a suit. He was a brawler. The butcher. Steam swirled around us, misting the mirror. I thought the pipes were seized, he said calmly. He didn't cover up. He didn't blush. He stood there, water dripping from his hair onto his chest, watching me watch him. I fixed them, I squeaked, my eyes glued to a particularly interesting scar on his oblique. Percussive maintenance. I see. He took a step forward. The air grew humid, thick with moisture and tension. Did you need to use the facilities? I can wait, I stammered, backing up until my heels hit the vanity. You were here first. Alpha privilege. We could conserve water, he suggested. His voice was low, contemplative, as if he were discussing stock options and not showering together. My brain short-circuited again. Nope, no, bad idea. I'll go label something. I grabbed Bandit, who was trying to eat a bar of expensive soap, and fled the bathroom. I didn't stop running until I was safely under the duvet, my face burning hotter than the fire. Chapter 10. The Fever. The adrenaline from the shower incident wore off quickly, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache in my temples. By evening, the drafty corridors of Grimsban Estate had won. I was shivering, but not from cold. My throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of razor blades. Zola? Torian's voice came from the doorway. I brought tea? I believe that is the protocol? I groaned, burying my face in the pillow. Go away. I am deceased. Tell my mother I love her and tell Bandit he's adopted. Torian was at my side in an instant. The mattress dipped under his weight. Zola? He touched my cheek. His hand was searingly hot, shocking against my ice-cold skin. He hissed, pulling back. You are freezing. Your skin is like ice. It's the chill, Torian, I rasped, my teeth chattering. The storm got into my bones. Humans are fragile like that. It's a design flaw. And you are overreacting, I mumbled, leaning into his touch. His skin was so warm, a radiant heat that seeped into my aching joints. He climbed into the bed. He didn't ask this time. He pulled me against his chest, careful of his strength. He acted as a living furnace, his naturally high alpha body temperature driving the cold out of me. I will not let you die from a design flaw, he vowed solemnly into my hair. Okay, big guy, I sighed, drifting off. Bandit curled up on Torian's chest, right over his heart. For once, the alpha didn't shoo him away. He just rested his large hand over the tiny creature, guarding us both as the storm raged on. Chapter 11. The Thaw. The sun was an insult. It streamed through the massive bay windows of the master suite, bright and cheerful, melting the snow that had trapped us in our little bubble of domesticity. I sat up, the duvet pooling around my waist. My fever had broken during the night, leaving me feeling hollowed out and strangely clear-headed. The bed beside me was empty. The sheets were cold. Bandit, I croaked. My sugar glider was asleep on the pillow where Torian's head had been, curled into a tight, furry ball. I dragged myself out of bed and walked to the window. Down in the driveway, the scene was almost comical if it weren't so heartbreaking. Torian was there. He wasn't wearing a coat, just a dark sweater that clung to his frame. He was shoveling snow away from the mint with a kind of aggressive efficiency, tossing heavy shovel loads of ice over his shoulder like they weighed nothing. He wasn't using magic. He wasn't using staff. He was digging me out, personally. He wants me gone, I whispered to the glass. I packed quickly. I folded the clothes I had borrowed, placed the label maker back in my bag, and scooped a grumpy bandit into his pouch. When I walked downstairs, the front door was already open. Torian stood by my car. The mint was free, looking like a green jelly bean in a sea of white slush. Torian's hands were shoved deep into his pockets. He looked exhausted, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding mine. The roads are clear, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth he'd shown last night when he held me through the fever. The bridge is salted. Thank you, I said, clutching my bag strap. For everything. The grilled cheese, the heat. It was basic hospitality, he dismissed, looking at a pine tree over my shoulder. I will wire your payment for the library organization. The distance between us felt vast. Last night, his skin had been against mine. Today, he was the Alpha King and I was just the help. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that I didn't want his money. I wanted him to ask me to stay. But I had my pride. I was Zola Prentice, and I didn't beg. Right, well, try not to mess up my filing system, I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. I climbed into the mint. The engine sputtered to life. I waited for a second, just 1 second, hoping he would tap on the glass, hoping he would growl, "Stay." He didn't move. He stood there like a statue carved from obsidian, watching me leave. As I drove across the bridge, I looked in the rear-view mirror. He was still standing there, a solitary figure against the melting snow. Chapter 12. Separation Anxiety. My apartment felt like a shoebox. It was quiet. Too quiet. For 3 days, I had been living in a Gothic mansion with a man who breathed like a thunderstorm. Now, the only sound was the hum of my refrigerator and Bandit crunching on a dried mealworm. We are better off, I told Bandit, who was currently trying to glide from the curtain rod to the ceiling fan. He's an alpha king. We are us. We label spice jars. We don't rule kingdoms. I threw myself into work. I organized 3 pantries for minor celebrities, color-coded a lawyer's entire wardrobe, and scrubbed my bathroom tile with a toothbrush until my knuckles were raw. But I was miserable. And apparently, so was Torian. The first call came on Tuesday at 11 a.m. "Miss Prentice." His voice rumbled through the phone speakers. It sounded tinny, stripped of its bass. "Is the library on fire?" I asked, pinning a phone between my shoulder and ear while I folded laundry. "No, I cannot locate the stapler." I paused. "The stapler?" "The red one. It is not on the desk." "Torian," I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "It is in the top drawer, where staplers live." "Oh." A pause. "I see. It was concealed." "Is that all?" "Yes. Goodbye." He hung up. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Zola. No greeting this time. The coffee machine is blinking red. It says descale. Is it self-destructing? "It needs vinegar, Torian. Run a cycle with vinegar." "I do not have vinegar. I have scotch." "Do not put scotch in the Keurig." Thursday, 9 a.m. Where is the blue file? Cloud server. Friday, midnight. Zola. His voice was different this time. Softer. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, missing the sound of his breathing. "What is it now, Torian? Did you lose the remote?" "No," he said quietly. The line crackled with silence. The library is very quiet. The sugar glider. He is not here to make the clicking noise." My heart squeezed painfully in my chest. "He misses you too. He tried to glide onto the pizza delivery guy yesterday." "Zola." He breathed my name like a prayer. "Sir!" A voice barked in the background on his end. "The council is waiting!" "I have to go," Torian said abruptly. The connection cut. I stared at the phone. He wasn't calling about staplers. He was inventing reasons to hear my voice. The idiot. The absolute, lovable, emotionally stunted idiot. Chapter 13. The Invitation. On Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door. Not a delivery knock. A polite knock. I opened it to find a man in a livery suit standing in my hallway. He looked distinctly out of place next to my neighbor's pile of Amazon boxes. "Miss Zola Prentice?" he asked, holding out a scroll. A literal scroll. It was tied with black velvet ribbon and sealed with red wax bearing the Varos family crest, a wolf devouring a moon. Yes?" "From the king," he said, handing it to me with a bow before turning on his heel and marching away. I carried it inside like it was a bomb. Bandit sniffed the wax and sneezed. I broke the seal. The parchment was thick, creamy, and smelled faintly of Torian, cedar, and ink. "Miss Prentice, your presence is requested at the annual Lunar Solstice Gala, Grimsben Estate, Saturday, 8 p.m. Attire, formal. TV." "TV?" I laughed, a hysterical bubble of sound. "He signed a royal decree. TV?" I sat down on my couch. A gala. He wanted me to come to the biggest social event of the year. Why? To organize the buffet? To label the guests? "No," I said, standing up. "If I go, I'm not going as the help. I'm going as a problem. I grabbed my purse. Come on, Bandit. We're going shopping. And we're going to spend an irresponsible amount of money. I went to Velvet and Vice, the most expensive boutique in the Shifter District. I didn't look at the price tags. I looked for impact. I found it on a mannequin in the back. It was midnight blue, dark enough to look black in low light, but shimmering like a starry sky when it moved. It was silk, strapless, with a slit that went high up my thigh. It was a dress that said, "I don't need you, but you definitely need me." "I'll take it," I told the sales clerk, "and the heels, the ones that look like weapons." Chapter 14. The Gala Entrance. Grimsben Estate was unrecognizable. The dark, brooding mausoleum had been transformed. Lights strung through the ancient oaks turned the driveway into a tunnel of stars. Luxury cars, Ferraris, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces lined the gravel path. I pulled up in the Mint. The valet looked at my rusty Volkswagen, then at the line of supercars, and looked confused. "Keep her close," I told him, handing over the keys. "She gets lonely." I stepped out. The air was crisp, biting against my bare shoulders, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt the adrenaline. I walked up the grand staircase. The heavy oak doors were open, spilling golden light and classical music into the night. I entered the ballroom. It was a sea of diamonds, velvet, and power. The most dangerous alphas in the country were here, sipping champagne and plotting mergers. Then, the room went silent. It wasn't a gradual hush. It was a sudden vacuum of sound. I realized with a jolt of panic that they were looking at me. Or rather, they were looking at the human woman in the midnight dress, walking into the wolf's den. I kept my chin high. Fake it till you make it, Zola. I scanned the room, and then I saw him. Torian was at the far end near the orchestra. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. A heavy velvet ceremonial cape draped over one shoulder, accentuating the width of his shoulders. He was listening to a short, stout man with a monocle, probably a duke. Torian turned. His gaze swept the room, bored and detached, until it landed on me. He froze. The glass of champagne in his hand slipped from his fingers. It hit the marble floor with a sharp shatter that echoed through the silent room. He didn't look down. He didn't seem to notice the exploding crystal or the champagne splashing onto his polished shoes. He just stared at me, his golden eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. The look on his face wasn't just attraction. It was devastation. He stepped over the broken glass. The Duke tried to say something, but Torian walked right past him, ignoring protocol, ignoring the gasps of the crowd. He moved toward me like a magnet, finding its true north. Chapter 15. The Bow and the Smile. He stopped 2 feet away from me. The air between us crackled, electric and heavy. He looked me up and down, slowly, as if verifying I was real. "Zola," he breathed. "You came." "You sent a scroll, Torian," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's hard to ignore a scroll." "You look..." He struggled for the word, his hands twitching at his sides as if he wanted to reach out but didn't dare. "Dangerous." That was the goal. He took a step closer. The scent of him, rain and pine, wrapped around me, making my knees weak. "I have missed." "Alpha Ross!" A high-pitched voice shattered the moment. Lydia Vane materialized beside us. She was wearing a red dress that was less of a garment and more of a suggestion. She was beautiful, in a sharp, predatory way. She positioned herself directly between me and Torian, blocking my view of him. She sank into a low, theatrical bow, offering him a view of her cleavage that defied physics. Your Majesty, she purred, batting her eyelashes. It is an honor. My father, Alpha Vane, sends his regards. Torian blinked, shaken out of his trance. He looked at Lydia, then he looked at me over her shoulder. I saw the panic in his eyes. He didn't know what to do. He was socially paralyzed. Then he remembered my advice. Be approachable. Smile. He looked back down at Lydia. He forced the corners of his mouth up. It was a stiff, dazzling, practiced smile. It was the kind of smile a politician gives a baby. Thank you, Lydia, he said, his voice strained. That is kind. My stomach dropped to the floor. To anyone else, it looked like a polite greeting. To me, it felt like a betrayal. That smile, the one I thought he was learning just for me, he was giving it away. To her. To the social climber who represented everything I wasn't. Wealthy, powerful, a wolf. He was playing the game, and I was just the organizer he flirted with during a blizzard. Lydia placed a hand on his arm, giggling. You must save a dance for me, my king. Torian didn't shake her off. He was too busy trying to be diplomatic. I stepped back. The noise of the party rushed back in, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the music. It was a cacophony of rejection. I made a mistake, I whispered. Torian's head snapped up. He looked past Lydia, his smile vanishing instantly. Zola? Enjoy your night, Your Majesty, I said, my voice cold. I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. But I walked fast, heading straight for the exit. Zola, wait! Torian's voice roared over the crowd. I didn't stop. I pushed through the heavy doors and out into the cold night air, the midnight blue dress fluttering behind me like a broken wing. Chapter 16. The Chase. The cold night air hit my face like a slap, but it was nothing compared to the sting in my chest. I marched down the stone steps of the Grimsban estate, my heels clicking sharply against the granite like gunfire. Zola! Torian's voice was a roar, echoing off the manor walls. It wasn't the commanded roar of an alpha. It was the desperate shout of a man who knew he had just dropped a nuclear bomb on his own happiness. I didn't stop. I clutched my silver purse tighter against my side. Inside, Bandit shifted, letting out a confused chirp. It's okay, buddy, I whispered, my voice trembling. We're leaving. We don't do politics. We don't do fake smiles. Zola, stop! I heard heavy footsteps behind me, the heavy, panicked thud of dress shoes on gravel. I turned the corner into the hedge maze that led to the valet stand. It was a shortcut I discovered while organizing the groundskeeper's shed. I am not stopping, I shouted over my shoulder, not breaking stride. Go back to your cleavage-bearing fan club. She's waiting for her dance. I do not want to dance with her, Torian yelled. I don't even like dancing. It involves too much hovering. I took a sharp left turn past a statue of a gargoyle. Behind me, I heard a loud crash, followed by a string of curse words that were definitely not appropriate for a king. I paused, just for a second. Did you just fall? No, Torian groaned. I tactically descended. My cape is too long. Who designed this? It's a hazard. I rolled my eyes, fighting the urge to laugh. He was the most lethal predator on the continent, and he was being defeated by formal wear. Go home, Torian, I called out, resuming my march. You have guests. You have a kingdom to run. I don't care about the guests, he shouted. He was closer now. I could hear his ragged breathing. Zola, please. I was trying to be, what is the word? Approachable. Approachable? I spun around. He skidded to a halt 10 feet away. He looked ridiculous. His tuxedo was rumpled, his tie was crooked, and there was a leaf stuck in his hair. He looked less like a king and more like a devastatingly handsome disaster. "Yes, you said to smile," he panted, gesturing wildly. "You said, 'Torian, stop looking like you want to murder everyone.' So I smiled." "You smiled at her," I accused, pointing a manicured finger at his chest. "You looked at her like she was the sun and you were a sunflower." "I was looking at her necklace," he argued, taking a step forward. "It was hideous. I was trying to be polite about how hideous it was." "She wasn't wearing a necklace, Torian." He froze. He blinked, looking genuinely confused. "She wasn't?" "No. She was wearing half a dress and a gallon of desperation." He opened his mouth, closed it, and then looked at me with those golden eyes full of panic. "Then I may have misread the situation." "You think?" I turned back around. "Goodbye, Torian." "Zola, wait! The valet has gone to the buffet. You can't leave." Chapter 17. The Grovel. I reached the Mint. The valet stand was indeed empty. My little green car sat alone under the moonlight, looking brave and out of place among the Bentleys. I fumbled for my keys. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from the adrenaline of yelling at a monarch. Zola. He was there. He hadn't used speed or strength to stop me. He had just walked up while I was struggling with the lock. He stood on the other side of the car door, his hands pressed against the glass. He didn't look angry. He looked devastated. "Open the window," he said softly. "No." "Please." There was something in his voice, a raw, jagged edge, that broke my resolve. I rolled the window down 3 inches. "You have 30 seconds before I hotwire this car if the key doesn't work." I wasn't flirting, he said, leaning down so his face was level with mine. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his cheekbones. "I don't know how to flirt. You know this. I asked you for a manual on small talk last Tuesday." I bit my lip. He did. He had literally asked for a flowchart on casual conversation. "Then why did you smile at her?" I whispered. "It looked real." "It was practiced," he admitted, looking down at his shoes. "I spent an hour in the mirror, trying to make my face look less like a threat. I wanted to show you I could do it. I wanted to impress you." My heart gave a painful thud. "You were practicing for me?" "I am always practicing for you," he said, his voice dropping to that deep, rumbling register that vibrated in my bones. "Every file I organize, every stapler I find, every time I don't growl at the staff, it is all for you." He looked up, his golden eyes burning into mine. I saw her and I panicked. I thought if I acted like a normal alpha, you would see I could fit into your world. Instead, I looked like an idiot. I stared at him. The king of Oakhaven, the butcher. Standing in a gravel driveway, terrified that he had disappointed his organizer. "You did look like an idiot," I said, my voice softening. "A lovesick idiot," he corrected. He reached through the open window. He didn't grab me. He just held his hand out, palm up, an offering. "I don't want a queen, Zola," he whispered. "Queens are political. They are cold. I want the chaos. I want the label maker. I want the rat." As if on cue, Bandit popped his head out of my clutch purse. He looked at Torian, blinked, and then, miraculously, didn't hiss. He chirped. Torian let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a week. See, even the creature agrees. I looked at his hand, then at his hopeful, terrified face. You have to fire the valet, I said, unlocking the door. Done, he promised immediately. He is exiled, or I will just give him a very stern look. I opened the door and stepped out. Torian didn't wait. He pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my neck, inhaling deeply. He shook against me, holding on as if I were the only solid thing in a spinning world. Chapter 18: The Library Sanctuary. We didn't go back to the party. We sneaked around the side of the estate like two teenagers breaking curfew and slipped into the library. The room was dark, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the high windows and the faint glow of the city below. It smelled of old paper and us. Torian locked the heavy oak door. The click echoed in the silence, final and absolute. He turned to me. The playfulness from the driveway was gone, replaced by a heavy, suffocating intensity. He walked toward me, backing me up until my hips hit the edge of the mahogany desk, the same desk where I had first yelled at him about Bandit. Torian, I breathed, my pulse hammering in my throat. I am tired of pretending, he growled, stepping into my space. He placed his hands on the desk on either side of me, caging me in. I am tired of staplers. I am tired of phone calls about coffee machines. He leaned down, his nose brushing against mine. I want to claim you, Zola, not as a king, as a man who is starving. Then eat, I challenged, breathless. I blindly set my purse and Bandit on a safe armchair nearby just as Torian lunged. He didn't need to be told twice. He lifted me onto the desk with effortless strength, sweeping a stack of neatly organized files onto the floor. Paper rained down around us like confetti. My filing system, I gasped, half laughing, half moaning, as his hands found my waist. I don't care, he murmured against my lips. I will buy you a new one. I will buy you a factory of them. He kissed me. It wasn't polite. It wasn't the kiss of a gentleman. It was the kiss of a wolf who had found his mate. It was hungry, possessive, and overwhelming. He tasted like champagne and desperation. My hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. The friction of his tuxedo against my silk dress sent sparks flying through my nerves. Say it, he demanded, pulling back just an inch, his eyes glowing pure molten gold. Tell me to stop. Tell me to leave. Because if you don't, I am never letting you go. I looked at him. I saw the scars on his chest through his shirt. I saw the fear of rejection in his eyes. I saw my partner. Don't you dare stop, I whispered. That's an order, Alpha. He groaned, a sound torn from his chest, and reclaimed my lips. The rest of the night was a blur of sensation. It was the feeling of being worshipped by a king who was happy to be on his knees. It was the realization that he wasn't just sleeping on top because he was dominant. He was covering me, shielding me, making sure that nothing in the world could touch me but him. And somewhere, in the corner of the room, on a stack of fallen encyclopedias, Bandit the Sugar Glider watched with wide eyes, probably wondering if this meant he got extra papaya tomorrow. Chapter 19: The Morning After. Sunlight filtered through the heavy velvet curtains of the master suite. At some point in the night, Torian must have carried us from the library to the bedroom, because the golden glow illuminated the wreckage of the sheets. It looked less like a place of rest, and more like the site of a very comfortable natural disaster. I woke up with the distinct feeling of being crushed, not by the weight of existential dread, but by approximately 240 pounds of alpha muscle. Torian Varas, the terrifying king of Oakhaven, was sleeping exactly how he had promised, on top. He was sprawled over me, one arm pinned under my pillow, the other thrown possessively across my waist. His face was buried in the crook of my neck, his breath warm and steady against my skin. For a man who claimed to have insomnia, he was currently comatose. I tried to wiggle my left leg free. Torian grumbled something that sounded like mine and tightened his grip, pulling me deeper into the mattress. Torian, I whispered, poking his shoulder. I need oxygen. You are a boulder. He didn't move. He just inhaled my scent and let out a contented sigh that vibrated through my entire ribcage. I smiled at the ceiling. I was trapped, sore, and somehow wearing one of his dress shirts. He must have wrestled me out of that gown and buttoned me into this while I was dead to the world. I had never been happier. Then I noticed the sugar glider. Bandit was not in his pouch. Bandit was not on the pillow. Bandit was perched directly on top of the Alpha King's head, tangled in his dark, messy hair like a nesting bird. He was asleep, clutching a lock of Torian's hair in his tiny paws as if it were a safety blanket. Oh my God, I wheezed, trying not to laugh and wake the beast. Suddenly, the heavy double doors to the suite flew open. Alpha, the council is demanding to know why you missed the... Rorik, the beta of the pack and Torian's second in command, marched into the room holding a tray of coffee and a stack of urgent tablets. He was a stern man who took his job very seriously. He stopped dead in his tracks. The tray in his hands rattled dangerously. His eyes went wide as he took in the scene. His lethal, terrifying Alpha King, shirtless and scarred, using a human woman as a mattress, with a small marsupial wearing his hair as a hat. Silence stretched in the room, thick and awkward. Bandit woke up. He looked at Rorik, narrowed his beady eyes, and let out a loud, aggressive hiss that echoed off the high ceilings. Torian stirred. He didn't open his eyes. He just lifted his head slightly from my neck, looking blindly in Rorik's direction with a scowl that could curdle milk. Rorik, Torian growled, his voice a gravelly rumble of morning irritation. Sir? Rorik stammered, looking like he wanted to fade into the wallpaper. Why are you in my bedroom? Torian asked, blindly reaching up to pat his head. His hand encountered the furry lump of the sugar glider. He didn't flinch. He just gently petted Bandit with his thumb. And why are you shouting at my mate? Mate. The word hung in the air. I stopped breathing. Rorik dropped the tray. Coffee splashed onto the Persian rug. The ceramic mugs shattered. Mate? Rorik squeaked. But she organizes the library, sir. She organizes my life, Torian corrected, opening one golden eye to glare at his beta. And currently, she is trying to sleep. Get out. And bring more coffee. If you wake the rat, you're fired. Rorik nodded frantically, backed out of the room, and slammed the doors shut. I looked at Torian, my heart doing somersaults in my chest. Mate? Torian shifted, burying his face back into my neck, his lips brushing my pulse point. I told you, Zola. I'm not letting you go. Now, go back to sleep. The council can wait. Torian, I whispered, threading my fingers through his hair, accidentally brushing Bandit. You have a sugar glider on your head. I know, he mumbled, drifting back to sleep. He likes the heat. Let him stay. Chapter 20. The New Normal. Epilogue. 6 months later. The Grimsbin estate had changed. It no longer looked like a vampire's depression den. The heavy velvet drapes were gone, replaced by airy linen. The monochromatic gray walls were now painted in warm creams and sage greens, and the library, my pride and joy, was the most organized room on the continent. I walked briskly down the hallway, clutching a clipboard and speaking into my headset. No, the catering for the solstice needs to be gluten-free options, not just raw meat. We have human guests this year, I instructed the event planner. And tell the groundskeeper if he trims the hedges into wolf shapes again, I will label his forehead Bad Dog. I hung up and checked my watch. 2 p.m. Council meeting. Turned the corner and glanced out the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the courtyard. My rusty, mint-green Volkswagen Beetle was parked in the prime spot, right next to Torian's armored black SUV. It looked ridiculous, like a jelly bean next to a tank. Torian refused to let me sell it. He said it had sentimental value because it was where he first groveled. I walked into the council chamber anteroom. The heavy oak doors were closed. Inside, I knew Torian was meeting with the regional alphas, a group of terrifying, scar-faced warlords who discussed territory borders and treaties. I pulled out my phone. I knew I shouldn't disturb him. He was the king. He was busy. I smirked and typed a message. To my king. Contact photo, him asleep with Bandit. Message. Move over. I waited. Inside the chamber, the meeting was tense. Alpha Vane, Lydia's father, was slamming his fist on the table, demanding lower tax tariffs for his pack. The air was thick with aggression and testosterone. Torian sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of bored indifference, radiating lethal power. His phone buzzed on the mahogany table. Every alpha in the room froze. No one interrupted the king during a session. Torian glanced at the screen. The terrifying mask cracked. A small, helpless smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the kind of smile that made his eyes crinkle. He picked up the phone and typed back. From my king. Message. Where? I bit my lip to keep from laughing and typed rapidly. To my king. Message. I'm bored. I want lunch, and you're sitting in my chair at the head of the table. Move over. There was a pause. Inside the room, Torian stood up. The heavy chair scraped against the floor. Gentlemen, he announced, buttoning his suit jacket, we are adjourned. Adjourned? Alpha Vane sputtered, his face purple. We haven't resolved the border dispute. Where are you going? Torian checked his watch, then looked at the door where I was standing on the other side. My queen is calling, Torian said simply, and she gets cranky when she's hungry. He walked to the doors and threw them open. I was standing there, leaning against the frame, holding Bandit in his pouch. Torian looked at me like I was the only person in the world. He didn't care about the confused warlords behind him. He didn't care about protocol. He walked over, wrapped an arm around my waist, and kissed my forehead. Did you tell them to move over? I asked, looking up at him. Torian smiled, guiding me toward the kitchen. I told them to leave, Zola. There is a difference. I missed you, I admitted. I was gone for 20 minutes. 20 minutes too long. He pulled me closer, his voice dropping to that low, rumbling growl that still made my knees weak. Then let's go home. I believe there is a nap scheduled. And remember the rule. I laughed, resting my head on his shoulder. I know. You sleep on top. Never, he whispered, kissing the top of my head. I sleep right beside you. Always. Bandit popped his head out of the pouch, looked at the empty council room, and chirped. He was the real king of this castle, and we all knew it. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Zola was brave for kicking the Alpha King out of bed, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is absolutely unhinged.